Welcome to Beatlemaniacs number 3. I have with me Seth Lerman and Dave Viger. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Leonard. Thank you very much for asking. How are you all doing?
Good.
I am doing great.
Good. Now, if you notice, Phil Weinstein is not with us tonight. He had some other business to take care of, just like you did last week, Seth, or the last show.
Mhm.
So, we're not rigid here with each other. We all need some time to do things that we can't do during the workday, I guess, So we were going to discuss a topic, but I'm going to wait for Phil for that. And that topic was, I'll just give a little preview. Phil mentioned Magic Alex twice in show number 1 and show number 2. This is show number 3. So the next time Phil comes back on, we're going to do the intro with talking about Magic Alex and who he was and all that stuff and his effect on the Beatles. You guys have any intro things that you want to bring up? Anything you've heard or want to talk about having to do with the Beatles?
Well, as I said to you in an email, Leonard, I'm very, very happy to announce that I'm seeing Paul McCartney twice.
Yeah.
May 21st in North Carolina with my daughter. It's her first time seeing McCartney. And going to the show with my daughter is a very big thing because she knows I'm a Beatle fanatic. So she gets to experience that with her dad. And then May 28th in Orlando, I'm going to see him a second time. So I'm pretty happy I was able to get tickets.
That's amazing. Now you're going too, right, Dave? Are you going?
Let's just say I haven't purchased my tickets yet, but I hope to.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to Fenway to see the Beatles. To the Beatles. You know what I mean. Paul McCartney. It's been a long day.
The tickets are more expensive than ever.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
They are and you got to be careful because a lot of these websites are very much more expensive than the others, and a friend of mine that I'm going with manages to get them pretty reasonably cost. But so I avoided getting ripped off this time. But let's dive into our topics then. If we don't have an intro question or anything like that, or anything you guys want to bring up, so anybody can go first.
You could send us a video, the George Harrison video. And I'm eager to hear your reaction on the Phil Collins, George Harrison story, which I think is hysterical. It was the All Things Must Pass album.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how old Phil Collins, I'm going to say he was maybe 20, early 20s then. Apparently he played congos on either on a couple of songs or maybe it was one song. I don't remember the whole story, but anyway, what happened was they talked about it years later and Phil Collins asked George, hey, whatever happened to, the work that I did, never made the album. And George blamed Phil Spector. And he said, but let me look at the master tapes and, I'll send them to you. It would be a great thing for you to have. So a few weeks goes by and Phil Collins receives some tapes in the mail and he listens to them and it's just awful Congo playing. Is it Congo or conga? Congo?
Conga.
Is it Congo?
Conga drums.
Conga. Sorry, not a percussionist.
Conga. I think it's conga.
Conga. So anyway, getting back to the story, he listens to these tapes and it's just some god awful conga playing, and then he hears George saying, "The lad playing the congas, he has to go." And what he actually did was he hired some people and he actually recreated it as a joke. And then a few weeks later, he sent him the real tapes. But I thought that was hysterical.
Wow. Okay. I remember it now. it kind of jumbled in my mind.
Yeah.
So from this, we find out the punchline is, which it was a punchline. It never happened. That was not Phil Collins playing the congas. Congos. Now I'm questioning the word myself, but it wasn't Phil Collins. He did a great job. George admitted or was pressured into revealing that it was all a fake. He hired those people, like you said, and it was an elaborate joke just at Phil Collins' expense. And, you know, I've been reading an awful lot about Phil Collins lately and how his wife cheated on him and he's had such bad luck. And one wife took him for all his money and he can't play drums anymore and he can't even walk. He can only do one thing and sing in the chair, you know?
Wow.
So I'm thinking, man, George, like, I never knew that side to George Harrison, that he was a practical joker like that. I gotta say, I'm really not a fan of practical jokes. I'm really not, because sooner or later you can call it what you want. You're hurting somebody, even temporarily. It's a form of passive aggressiveness, if you'll pardon my disloyalty to my sometimes favorite Beatle. You know, I don't know. What do you think, Seth?
I like his sense of humor, and I'm one, Leonard. I do play a lot of practical jokes. It breaks up the workday. So I can't do them as much now in the current position I'm in. But I'm not surprised, considering he had such an affinity for the Monty Pythons and the Blackadders and the Marx Brothers, all those great shows that they were always watching. And I heard within the group, he was often the one that would, you know, do a practical joke. Mostly, from what I understand, it was to Ringo.
Yeah.
More so than John or Paul. So I'm not too surprised at that. I remember hearing that story. I don't know if I heard the part, though, of the practical joke for Phil Collins, but I do remember hearing that Phil did play on the All Things Must Pass album and that he was left off the album. As far as the remainder of that story, I'm glad that David brought it up, because I either never heard it or I totally forgot about it. So I'm enjoying that right now, trying to picture what Phil Collins' face must have looked like when he heard those the drums, probably out of tune or offbeat or something like that. So I rather enjoy it.
Dave, what do you think? What's your opinion on it?
I mean, I just appreciate his sense of humor, and it just reminded me of something I heard the other day when George was attacked in his own home, and I think we all probably know that story.
Yeah.
There were a couple of gardeners that it was their first day on the job working in his home. So he's on the stretcher being wheeled out of his home after being attacked. And he motions over to these guys to come over to the stretcher. So they come over to him and he says, "So what do you think about the job so far?"
Yeah, I heard that one.
Oh my God. Oh, that's
Yeah.
wild. I mean, anything can be joked about. I guess that's what it proves. But it like I said, I kind of stand by my statement. It depends. How long did he let Phil Collins think that he was the one that was playing the bad instrument? You know what I mean? It's got a tinge of meanness to it. I'm sorry if it lasts too long. If it's within an hour or a couple of hours, it's okay, I guess. You know, I'm familiar with what they call ribs. Okay, a rib in professional wrestling. When I used to, interview the wrestlers, they would tell stories about people defecating in bags and ripping up people's property and throwing it away. That's when you're taking humor way over the line. You know what I mean? This thing here, nothing was hurt. It depends, how Phil reacted, how, whether he goes along with it. If it was me, with me, humor is, I'm going to give you my definition of humor. Humor is laughter, not at somebody else's expense, but you're laughing with the person. It's not
that can be shared. Yeah.
not something you do to somebody. That's just my opinion. And I understand, Seth, about the Monty Python. You're right. It does kind of go along with that. And they would probably do that to each other. I don't know. Who knows? But
If I may add one more story regarding George's sense of humor, this was told by Ringo. I'm going to have to paraphrase. Ringo was visiting George. There was a lot of work being done in the yard. Paul just came out with the album Standing Stones.
Mhm.
And there was these two giant boulders in the yard. And Ringo asked about the boulders, and George looked at him and said, Paul sent them the boulders as a promotional item from the album. And Ringo's comment was, he didn't send anything to me. So, no surprise Ringo fell for that one though. But
Oh, that's funny.
friendship going
I
back
remember
many
hearing
years.
that one.
Great.
Wow. Seth, what do you got for us today?
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit. I don't know what order when I chose the topics at the beginning of our podcast. I want to talk a little bit about the Threetles, the 1994.
Yeah, that was my
collaboration
topic.
between-
But that's great.
Was that
That's great.
topic? I thought I picked that topic. I think we picked the
Oh,
same
maybe.
topic.
Well, it's a big topic. Okay.
Yes.
So what I want to concentrate on are the anthologies. We'll call it
Fantastic.
the anthology albums. I got all three of them right here. And go ahead, keep going, Seth.
Well, I was very excited, first of all, to hear about the anthology series, and even more excited, a little concerned as well when I found out that they were doing new songs or re-recording the backing tracks to some old Lennon songs. Because for me, I was born in '64. I was 6 when the Beatles split up, and this was the first time that I would actually hear new Beatles songs that I've never heard before. At the same time, everybody else would hear them, unless you had all the Lennon bootlegs. So I was quite excited. I remember the highlights leading up to the first episode of the anthology with the new Beatles song at the end. And I don't know if I was overly excited. Maybe I was. The first hearing of Free as a Bird, I was a little saddened by it. And I think it was due to the quality of tape that John Lennon's voice came over. It was at high pitched, and it didn't really, to me, sound like classic Lennon. But the song has grown on me, and it grew on me over the years, and even the first few weeks after that. Well, I think it's just a masterful song. It's the first song that has 3 different Beatles singing lead, because Paul had a verse and George had a line or two. I love George's slide guitar. I thought the video that accompanied the song was really nice. And I enjoyed some of the documentary that showed the making of Free as a Bird, because it showed the 3 Beatles in the studio working together again, which I thought was really interesting. There was that scene with the park bench, and I think Paul was
Sitting on the
drinking a
grass.
cup of coffee and George was playing the guitar. That was just really nice to see after the Let It Be stuff that we saw, when the breakup was occurring. Real Love, I really enjoy Real Love. I thought that was a very nice song. But they said that they didn't enjoy making that as much as Free as a Bird, because it was pretty close to being completed when they had that tape that they received from Yoko. So for those reasons, I'm very glad to be able to experience a new Beatles song coming out. And both have grown on me over the years, right? Just to me, it's the Beatles. I got to listen to the Beatles again, and they do sound like the Beatles. The backing of Free as a Bird sounds just like the Beatles. Mystery Tour, Pepper time period, I believe. So I'll start off by saying that I'm interested to hear what everybody else has to say.
Dave?
I do have some questions, I guess. I had read that the comment was that Paul and George kind of picked up where they left off with Let It Be, and there was some disagreements on maybe the guitar. That's what it was. It was the guitar solo. Paul had said it needs to sound like the Beatles. It doesn't need to sound like a solo Beatle performance. It needs to sound more like the Beatles. So there was some, I think he actually said that there was a competition between him and George to find the best lyric, because like you said, Seth, they essentially completed the song. It was an incomplete song when they received it. So I don't know who won those battles, but I certainly, I know what you mean about the song really growing on you. I remember watching it. You know, wasn't it? It was a TV series like Thanksgiving night, and I think it was that first episode. You know, wow! At the end, we're going to hear a new Beatles song, and I mean, and it's proven since then that, you know, even 50 years later, anything they release pretty much jumps to #1. You know, just because it's the Beatles. But I remember it was, yeah, it was weird to hear a song that sounded like the Beatles, but, you know, Lennon's lyric, the way he sounded, you know, it was different. I think George's vocal is literally one of my favorites. Just there's an emotion to it, you know, and I guess knowing, you know, that it would be one of their last songs, it was just, you know, I thought it was a great song. In Real Love, that was real, or I had heard that or heard versions of that from maybe the Lost Lennon tapes years earlier, you know, so that was definitely a known song, but Free as a Bird was a, you know, to me, a brand new song.
Okay, so I'm going to weigh in now. I'm going to be negative Nelly tonight, I guess. So I do not consider Free as a Bird and Real Love true Beatles songs, and I'll tell you why. What you mentioned, Dave, about the competition thing, George definitely won because the guitar solo and the guitar settings just sounds like a George Harrison solo song. Make it okay. The backing vocals, Seth, I agree with you. It was great to hear Paul and George harmonizing again, and it did sound like the Beatles in that respect. But the song itself, both of the songs, just there was something missing. I could feel it. Obviously, it was John. You know, he had no input. He couldn't contribute from the beyond. I like Real Love better than Free as a Bird, and it's just personal preference. I don't have any logical reason for that, but it bothered me when I heard Free as a Bird, those George Harrison guitar settings. It sounds like a George Harrison LP. You know, I mean, to me, it's not a real Beatles song unless all four of them can work on it. You know, or even if all four of them were even in the room. You know, I can't put, they just sound like, have you guys ever listened to Free as a Bird and Real Love, the Lennon demos?
Yes, since that time, yes.
So I've listened to those a lot. I actually kind of like Lennon's versions better alone.
Very simple, right? Yeah.
It's very simple, straightforward. You know what I mean? Now, strangely, what bothered, I think it was you, Dave. You said that or no, it was Seth. The high pitched, you know, the low quality of Lennon's vocal. It's pretty much the same effect that Paul used on, even though it wasn't an effect, on Honey Pie. Mm-hmm. You know, on Honey Pie, it was meant to sound like an old 78, and it sounded like an old 78 unintentionally on those songs when he would do the lead. So that part didn't really bother me. Just the songs themselves, the songs don't measure up. If I was a Beatle, I would have rejected them. They just don't measure up.
To piggyback on that, Len, I did read that one writer wrote that they'd be difficult to be as a B-side of a 45.
Yeah.
Would be the best. I look at it from a personal standpoint, because it was the first new song I ever heard. It was the first time I could have that anticipation of a new Beatles song. Mm-hmm. One other part that I found interesting came from McCartney. When Jeff Lynne was hired to produce those songs,
yeah,
Paul McCartney had great concerns because Jeff was George's friend.
Right. I read that, yeah.
And we talk about George winning out on the guitar solo. He also won out on Jeff Lynne did produce, and McCartney enjoyed working with Jeff Lynne as well.
Yeah. I was concerned about Jeff Lynne as well. I do like ELO, and I like Jeff Lynne for what they are. what he is. I don't, I would rather have seen Giles Martin do it. George Martin, I believe, was still alive,
Mhm.
but his hearing had gone by that time. He couldn't do it. So I don't know why Giles was Giles maybe involved a little bit with Jeff's production.
No, Giles and George were working on the anthology tapes, going through, putting
Yeah.
those 3 discs together, I heard, and going through all that. They weren't available at the time. I think Giles was more George's ears at that time, George Martin's ears. But I did read that they were busy with the anthology series itself.
Now, speaking of that, I have all 3 DVDs right here, Anthology 1, 2, and 3. And I, saying what I said, I mean, I love the anthologies and I love the different versions of Across the Universe. Some of the first songs that they did, In Spite of All the Danger, that's when that song was revealed. And I like that very much. It's an integral part of Beatle history, I think, that was missing. And stuff that they did that you never heard of. And I have to remind myself, there's a song called You'll Be Mine, Cayenne, My Bonnie, which I already had as a bootleg somewhere. Oh, no, that was on the Tony Sheridan album. Wasn't a bootleg. Ain't She Sweet, Cry for a Shadow, the only George and Paul composition. 3 Cool Cats, that was a bootleg from the Decca auditions. Now, there was a 3rd song that Paul wanted to work on that Yoko had given Paul, and that was Now and Then. So Now and Then was a very bad recording. All of the recordings had this little hum in it, and Jeff Lynne was able to remove it, but it was so loud on Now and Then that it couldn't be done. And if you go on the internet and write Now and Then, the Beatles, there are a ton of amateur productions. Some of them are pretty impressive. But again, I think George was right. I wouldn't have called it rubbish, but I would have said it's not worth working on, Now, there's another song. Paul asked George to write a song with him, and it just didn't work. And it's just, I don't think it'll ever be heard or whatever, Not since Cry for a Shadow had they collaborated. Shades of Get Back documentary there, that old resentment cropped up, I think. He said, well, you never asked me before, so why am I going to work on this with you now? That's what the story said. I don't know how true that is, but that would have been interesting, though, I think. I don't know. Have you guys heard anything about Now and Then?
I just heard the comment that George said it was rubbish, and Paul said when George made up his mind that he was not going to do something, he was not going to do it. There was no change in it. And then he laughed. And that's the most I've heard on that song. I wish there was a 3rd song. I wish there was a 4th or 5th, but I liked seeing the videos of the 3 of them working together. If that's all that came out from it, I'll take it.
Yeah, I get it. I'd still rather see the 3 of them than all of the tribute bands. The tribute bands are fine, but it's just I wouldn't go see them. All right. Does anybody else have another topic? One more topic before we say so long.
The topic that I picked is one that I've always found interesting, just asking myself the question, what makes the Beatles the best ever? And there's many ways to look at that, right? I think they were very lucky. The perfect storm, maybe looking at like Brian Epstein, George Martin, even Ringo, joining the band and having the success that they did with him. Maybe even the Ed Sullivan Show, stuff like that. Just, I think in a way, in a sense, they were very lucky. The thing that blows me away is they barely recorded together for 7 years, from, the time they recorded Love Me Do until, Abbey Road. They did get together to finish off Let It Be here and there, but for the most part, I think Abbey Road was the end of the 4 of them, recording together. the thing that blows me away is the age, the age that I mean, when they walked over that Abbey Road crosswalk, I mean, Lennon was 28, Ringo was 28, Paul was 27, and George was 26, and it was over. That's just incredible. Paul McCartney recorded yesterday. I think he was just 22, almost 23. It just amazing stuff. All of the firsts that they did, that they may not get credit for. Music videos. Certainly not going to say that the Beatles invented music videos, but when they stopped touring, and even the Paperback Writer, Rain, that was a video they did. I mean, that was 1966. Concept albums. Sgt. Pepper was probably the first concept album. Stadium concerts, definitely a first. Lyrics on an album, the back of Sgt. Pepper. A live global satellite broadcast with All You Need Is Love. Certainly their chart success, the first 5 songs, #1. And then I think they had 14 out of the top 100. And then, look at some of the studio techniques, the double tracking and backwards guitar solos and feedback. And so I'm really just curious on, trying to be unbiased, but, like I said, the age that they, were the Beatles. I mean, mid to late 20s, absolutely amazing. What do you guys think?
I agree with everything that David said. And I've told my students this, I still can't believe that none of them were yet 30 when it was over. I think it was at the end of the anthology series when they tried to describe what they believed that their effect was on the world. And I don't think they could actually do it either. I think Paul said we just made people happy. The songs were positive. I think it was a lot of things that took place. Brian Epstein, George Martin being their producer and allowing them to write their own songs and make suggestions in the studio, and the fact that he was also willing to take risk. When I think about the body of work, I actually counted the songs many years ago. I think it was 204 songs in the 7 years of recording, if I can remember correctly. But you combine that with the 2 movies, the hundreds of TV and radio appearances live, the countless world tours that they did between 63 and 66. That's a lot of work. I can understand why maybe it lasted 7 years. They were together every day just about for the 7 years. And when they went on holiday, they went together pretty much. I think they just right timing. They made people happy. I think they were a breath of fresh air, and it was something new and unique. 4 guys from England, let alone Liverpool. I don't think anybody ever heard of Liverpool up until that point. But I think they made people happy, and it was the right timing, and I think the world was ready for the Beatles. And I don't think it caught them by surprise as much as some of them say they wanted to. They always say they were going to go to the top, and they did. And but I wish I lived through it. I would have loved to have been there for it all. I think that's my big regret in life. I wasn't there when the Beatles arrived in America. It was 9 months later I was born.
And I refused Beatle tickets. Isn't that terrible? It still bothers me. But everything that you guys said is true. I think people forget now because less people are around now who were there then. All the firsts that they did that's Dave mentioned. And, I remember hearing Lady Madonna on the radio for the first time and how different that song was from anything that they had ever done previously. And I remember thinking, was that the Beatles? And they were always full of surprises. They always, if you thought they were going to go left, they went right. And they were never predictable. They never repeated themselves, or rarely. If they did find themselves repeating themselves, I'm sure you guys read some of Paul's statements about that, then they would change the formula. If they found a formula, they would go away from it completely, never letting more than 2 songs. I say that because I always compare When I'm 64 to Your Mother Should Know. It's the same structure of both of those songs. But those are very, very rare instances where you would see something like that. Now, there's another phenomenon that goes along with their success and why the Beatles are the Beatles, and that's the oversaturation almost of the Beatles. Nobody in history, I think they try to make the argument maybe Frank Sinatra was the first to have everybody screaming, and then you had Elvis. This is true. But the extent to which the Beatles are venerated, almost like gods, you can see it on YouTube comments. Now, very interestingly, the official Beatles YouTube site banned all comments. Did you guys notice that?
No, I did not.
So if you go and listen to a Beatles song on YouTube, there's no comments underneath. And my theory as to why is because people are so passionate about them, they argue like it's a religion, people who like something, people who don't like something, people, arguing about the favorite Beatle, who contributed more, who was the bad guy, who broke up the Beatles, those things can get pretty vicious, but what bothers me the most, and I expect that with the Beatles, everything I just mentioned, what bothers me are the people who will equate a solo song like 3 Legs by Paul to Eleanor Rigby. They'll we kind of touched upon it earlier, that just because it's the Beatles, people sometimes will like it because it's the Beatles. But it loses the ability, people lose the ability to discern what is a good song, what is a bad song, how to critique it fairly. And it just becomes rubbish, as George would say. You can love the group, but maintain some, it's like somebody who's in love, like that ridiculous period that I call the sickening phase that young people get into when they're first, the person can do no wrong. It never left with the public's adoration toward the Beatles. So many of them cannot even judge the quality of a song objectively because of that love. And it's just crazy, to be that besotten with them, with anything, with anyone, is just, I don't know, kind of crazy.
When you mentioned the diversity of the songs, my favorite example is you get the 45 RPM of Hey Jude on one side and Revolution on the other.
Yeah.
What a package that is. I mean, totally different, great songs.
Yeah.
And if I was going to play them for someone that's not a Beatles fan and say this is the same band, I don't think they'd believe me. A 18 or 20-year-old of today wouldn't think it's the same band, because everything today, the artists, it's the same formula until they disappear forever.
It's true. On the other hand, there are the fans that will expect from Paul McCartney himself a Beatles quality song, and that's not fair either, you know? So I don't know. People really ragged on Silly Love Songs, and that was a pretty good song. That had a lot of different changes in it. It was very inventive, a little bit sappy if you don't like the topic of love that much,
I have a question about that. I've always wondered, I've heard, was that actually a quote by John Lennon about Paul writing silly love songs?
I heard that too, and I'm not sure if I can back that up or not.
I've never been able to back it up either, but pretty good story if it is true.
I did hear that, and we'll have to research that. I'm sure that's around somewhere if it was said, But it's funny, as much as, like I said, people overestimate, the Beatles, they'll underestimate the solo guys, the guys that made up the Beatles. They'll be more harsh they'll be more harsh with them, thinking that they should have Beatle qualities. So they'll be harsher in their critique of them solo. You know, what is your best solo Beatles project song?
Oh boy, that's a good one. My favorite Beatles solo album. Well, it depends on what day of the month it is. Sometimes it's either one of the first two Lennon albums or George's All Things Must Pass.
Mhm.
For a while there, many years ago, I could not stop playing Venus and Mars by McCartney. I love that album.
Mhm.
I listened to it recently. Again, I don't have the same feeling as I used to, but I still enjoy it. That was on my turntable for a long time. I think, boy, it's either Imagine, the Ono Band, or All Things Must Pass.
The song of the album.
The albums, the songs. One of my favorite was Just Like Starting Over by Lennon. I love that song.
Mhm.
If I'm just gonna pick a song,
They
I
say
really did enjoy that.
he wrote that in response to Queen released something in 1980,
Yeah, I
Crazy Little
remember
Thing
that
Called
song.
Love. He heard it on the radio, and that inspired him to write Just Starting Over.
Yeah, I enjoy that immensely. I always have. Same feeling every time I hear it. It's like the first time.
And my favorite solo Beatles song is Live and Let Die by Paul. It was produced by George Martin, so it had sort of a Beatley thing to it. And to me, that could have gone on any Beatles album. That's the only song that I can say that would belong on a Beatles album. One more song besides that, but it wasn't really a hit, was Bluebird. I thought that was a complete song, like a Beatles song. But the other ones are always missing something. That's just my opinion. Dave, what do you have?
Favorites is from the, I don't know, was it called the Lennon Anthology? The box set there, that I think it was 4,
I
which you
don't know.
can't find on Apple
Yeah.
iTunes.
Really? Is it
Yeah.
a discontinued product?
I'm guessing it's protected, or just, you can find it on YouTube, but Nobody Loves You When You're Down and Out, the acoustic
yeah.
version that's on that. I mean, I like that version better than, you know, the one on what is it? The album.
Walls and Bridges.
Walls and Bridges, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that, the acoustic version much better. But I guess any song that has a story for me,
Mhm.
you know, like Whatever Gets You Through the Night, you know, good song, but there's a story behind it. You know, Elton John's on it. You know, songs like that. Favorite Paul song? Yeah, that's a tough one. I really like Junior's Farm. Probably not one of his
Mhm.
best, but that's a good rocking tune. My Sweet Lord, probably one of my favorites by George Harrison. And album, yeah, probably Whatever Day of the Week, I guess. You know, I do like the stripped down version of Double Fantasy that came out a couple of years ago. That's, you know, I like stuff like that. That's really, you know, it's something extra that, you know, you wouldn't normally get. I do remember Paul saying, Live and Let Die. Did they, I don't know who it was. Somebody said, is that they thought it was a demo and it was the actual finished version of that song? Did you hear that story?
I did not.
Yeah. I don't remember who it was though. But yeah, that's a great song. And lots of pyrotechnics with that song over the years. That doesn't get old.
Well, I didn't give my favorite George and John song. So my favorite John song is definitely Number 9 Dream. I like that a lot. It's very, very inventive, and I've never heard anything like it. And it's produced really well. I think John produced that himself too. And for George, Isn't It a Pity is my favorite song. I was obsessed with that song when it came out. And it's easy to guess what that song was about when it came out. You know, he wrote it during, I think, the White Album era. So many things happen to people that make great songs, but they're sad to live through. You
Yes.
know, I think that's true with a lot of songwriters, if not all of them. But anyway, this is the longest Beatlemaniacs show we've ever done, guys. Number 3. And hopefully all 4 of us will be back on our next one. Do you guys have anything more you want to say to make it even longer?
It's good to see everybody again.
It is.
And just the last one, I was sad that that happened. It was a last minute situation. Glad to
Yeah.
be back tonight.
Good to have you back. It's not the same without the 4 of us, just like the Beatles. We're emulating them all the way. Dave, anything?
Just one more observation about my topic. You know, I think Seth brought it up, just the amount of work, their body of work in that 7 years. And, you know, Michael Jackson recorded Thriller, and then his follow-up to Thriller was 5 years later.
Yep.
You know, that just kind of puts it in perspective. You know, Elvis, he had his run, and then, you know, was doing movies, and then his comeback, and they just were nonstop for 7 years. It's pretty amazing.
It's true. All right. Well, until next time on the Beatlemaniacs number 4, this is number 3. I'm Len.
I'm Seth.
I'm Dave.
And we are the
The
Beatlemaniacs.
Beatlemaniacs.